center of Bradford, England, a young mother was pushing her son's stroller through a crowded street. Just a few minutes later, she was attacked by her own husband in front of dozens of witnesses. What made this case shock the entire United Kingdom was not only the brutality of the attack, but because, according to prosecutors, this was not a spontaneous act. Everything appeared to have been prepared in advance, and when the case was over, it left behind a question that continued to haunt many people. Could anything have been done differently to prevent this tragedy from happening? On the 6th of April, 2024, in the center of Bradford, England, a young mother was pushing her son's stroller through a crowded street. Just a few minutes later, she was attacked by her own husband in front of dozens of witnesses. What made this case shock the entire United Kingdom was not only the brutality of the attack, but because, according to prosecutors, this was not a spontaneous act. Everything appeared to have been prepared in advance, and when the case was over, it left behind a question that continued to haunt many people. Could anything have been done differently to prevent this tragedy from happening? Kulsuma Akhtar was only 27 years old when her marriage gradually began to become a place where she constantly lived in a state of tension. From the outside, there was not much that would immediately make people suspicious. They lived in Oldham like an ordinary young family, a quiet husband, a young mother who had recently given birth, and a baby only a few months old. No arguments in the street. Everything appeared almost completely normal. They later made many people feel the most uneasy. According to the prosecution records, Habibur Masum rarely allowed outsiders to see his controlling behavior. It did not begin with violence immediately. Not the kind of danger that is easy to recognize overnight. Everything came much more slowly, little by little. At first, it was just constant questions. Where was Kulsuma? Who was she talking to? Why did she not answer her phone? Why did she want to go out alone? Then over time, Kulsuma began to change. She met with people less often, spoke less, and gradually felt as though she always had to be careful about even the smallest things. Every text message. What frightened Kulsuma was not only what Masum said, but the feeling that the man wanted to control everything in her life. And then over time, that marriage began to feel more like a place where she had to be on guard every day than a place where she could feel safe. Eventually, Kulsuma Akhtar made the decision to leave Oldham. She took her infant son and moved into a women's refuge in Bradford, RD. It was a place for women trying to rebuild their lives after domestic abuse. A quiet place, private, and separated from the life she had left behind. At first, everything seemed to slow down for the first time in many months. No more tension filling the old house. No more watching someone's mood before saying the wrong thing. Kulsuma slowly began returning to very ordinary parts of life. Things that had almost stopped feeling like they belonged to her anymore. Taking her son out for walks. Sitting quietly in a park without constantly checking her phone. Walking through unfamiliar streets where nobody knew who she was. According to people who knew Kulsuma, she seemed to slowly believe that life might finally become peaceful again. But even during the quietest moments, the anxiety never fully disappeared. Sometimes, Kulsuma would stop for several long seconds just because her phone vibrated, or instinctively glance behind her when someone walked too close past her in the street. The fear was no longer loud. It became something quieter, hidden in the way she watched the world around her. According to the later investigation, Habibur Masum did not accept that the marriage was over. And while Kulsuma was beginning to believe she had finally left her old life behind, somewhere out there, Masum had not truly disappeared from her life at all. According to the investigation records, after Kulsuma Akhtar moved to Bradford, Habibur Masum did not disappear from her life the way many people hoped he would. Instead, he began appearing around the city in ways that later drew particular attention from investigators. For days at a time, CCTV cameras captured Masum walking through neighborhoods near the women's refuge where Kulsuma was living. Sometimes he simply stood across the street. Other times he sat alone for long periods near the routes she regularly walked. According to prosecutors, Masum appeared to be observing and memorizing Kulsuma's new routines, the times she went outside, the streets she usually walked through, and even the moments when she was alone with her son. What made the case even more disturbing was how quietly everything happened. No public threats, no dramatic confrontations in the street. Masum simply kept appearing around the area, then disappearing again, as though he had never been there. According to court records, he also began finding different reasons to contact Kulsuma. Sometimes it involved the hospital, other times it involved their young son. Investigators believed this was Masum's way of slowly lowering Kulsuma's sense of caution. Throughout that entire period, Masum carried a kitchen knife with him. That detail later became an important part of the prosecution's case, because according to prosecutors, it showed that the attack was not something that happened in a few seconds of lost control. Everything resembled a process that had been prepared in advance, day by day, step by step. As though Masum was no longer trying to save the marriage, but waiting for the right moment to re-enter Kulsuma's life in the most dangerous way possible. On the afternoon of the 6th of April 2024, Central Bradford was crowded like any normal weekend day. Everything moved with the familiar rhythm of the city. People shopping along the stores, cars passing through busy intersections, families pushing strollers along the pavements among the crowds. None of them knew that within just a few minutes, everything on that street was about to change completely. Kulsuma Akhtar was walking with a friend. She was pushing her baby son's stroller in front of her. According to witnesses, the moment looked completely ordinary. No argument, no shouting in the distance, no sign that an attack was about to happen in broad daylight. Then suddenly, Habibur Masum appeared. CCTV footage later captured him moving toward Kulsuma through the crowded street, what many witnesses never forgot. And almost immediately, he began attacking Kulsuma in the middle of the street. According to prosecutors, Masum repeatedly stabbed her in the head and across her body. Witnesses later described how panic spread through the crowd almost instantly. Some people screamed, some ran from the scene, others tried to call emergency services while standing frozen in shock. According to forensic records, Kulsuma suffered more than 25 stab wounds, even after she collapsed onto the pavement. The attack did not stop. Some witnesses later said, Masum even stomped on her before walking away. But what made this case so deeply shocking across the UK was not only the brutality of the attack itself, it was the image of the small stroller still beside Kulsuma during the final moments of her life. Their infant son was still lying inside, far too young to understand what had just happened on that crowded street, while the mother who had spent months trying to escape a life filled with fear was ultimately murdered in broad daylight. After the attack in central Bradford, the scene on the street descended into near chaos. People began screaming. Some rushed toward Kulsuma. Others stepped back in panic, unable to understand what had just happened. But in the middle of all that chaos, Habibur Masum reacted in a way many people later said they could never forget. According to CCTV footage shown in court, he left the scene at an almost completely normal pace. He did not run, he did not look back, and he showed none of the behavior people would expect from someone who had just carried out a brutal daylight attack. The knife was left behind. Meanwhile, Masum simply continued walking through the street as though he were leaving somewhere after a brief stop. What deeply disturbed many people across the UK was the almost cold separation between what he had just done and the calmness he displayed only minutes later. While paramedics were trying to reach Kulsuma and people nearby were still in shock, CCTV captured Masum calmly boarding a bus. According to footage later played in court, he sat down like an ordinary passenger, no attempt to hide his face, no visible panic. At times, his expression appeared strangely detached, something many viewers later found deeply unsettling. Some British newspapers eventually referred to him as the smiling killer, not because Masum openly laughed after the attack, but because what disturbed the public most was how emotionally unaffected he seemed after everything that had just happened. While Kulsuma still lay on the pavement, and their infant son remained beside his mother in the stroller. The man responsible for the attack was already leaving Bradford, with almost no visible sign of emotion at all. Just hours after the killing in Bradford, the investigation quickly turned into a nationwide manhunt across the UK. At that point, Habibur Masum had almost completely vanished. West Yorkshire Police distributed CCTV images of him to police units across the country, train stations, bus terminals, airports, and multiple major transport routes were all asked to watch for the man who had walked away from a daylight murder scene. Meanwhile, news of the attack began dominating headlines across Britain. A young mother murdered in the middle of a crowded street, her infant son still lying in a stroller beside her, and the suspect somewhere out there, still missing. According to investigators, after leaving Bradford, Masum continued moving through different areas. Security cameras captured him appearing at bus stations, then hours later showing up somewhere else entirely. Every trace seemed fragmented. No one knew exactly where he was trying to go. What made the search increasingly tense was the fact that time kept passing without anyone finding him. Investigators understood that the longer it continued, the greater the chance Masum could disappear again. For several days, police reviewed huge amounts of CCTV footage, tracked transport routes, and pieced together small fragments from his movements after the attack. Public pressure also grew stronger each day. By then, the case had become one of the biggest stories in the country. Then, around 3 to 4 days after the attack, the manhunt finally came to an end. Habibur Masum was located in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire, hundreds of miles away from Bradford. The moment of his arrest quickly appeared across national news broadcasts, because after days of police searching across the country, the man accused of murdering his wife in broad daylight could no longer keep running. When the trial began at Bradford Crown Court, the atmosphere inside the courtroom was almost constantly heavy. Kulsuma Akhtar's family sat silently at the back, while Habibur Masum appeared before the jury with almost no visible emotion on his face. According to journalists present during the trial, he remained remarkably calm throughout the proceedings. What especially angered many people was the way Masum attempted to explain the attack that took place on the 6th of April 2024. He admitted to manslaughter, but denied murder. Masum claimed that he had lost control during the moment of the attack, but prosecutors completely rejected that argument. Because, according to the investigation records, everything leading up to Kulsuma's death pointed toward preparation in advance. Masum had appeared around Bradford multiple times, monitored the area near the women's refuge where she was living, carried a kitchen knife with him, and repeatedly tried to contact her before the attack. According to prosecutors, this was not an act committed during a few seconds of uncontrolled anger. It was a deliberate pattern of behavior that had developed over many days. Throughout the trial, the final CCTV footage involving Kulsuma was also shown to the jury. The courtroom reportedly fell almost completely silent as images from the scene appeared on the screen. Meanwhile, Masum showed very little visible reaction. That detail became especially difficult for many people inside the courtroom to accept. In June 2025, the jury found Habibur Masum guilty of murder. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 28 years before being considered for release. For Kulsuma's family, the sentence could never bring her back, but at the very least, the man she once said she feared most would never again be able to reach her. Perhaps the most heartbreaking thing about the case of Kulsuma Akhtar is not the way she died, but the future she never had the chance to live. A young mother, a baby only a few months old, and a life she was trying to rebuild from the beginning. Cases like this remind us that the effects of abuse do not exist only while it is happening. They can continue long afterward, affecting the way a person sees themselves, trusts other people, and feels safe in everyday life. For Kulsuma's family, that loss can never be repaired, but her story still leaves behind a hope that people living in fear will be heard sooner, given more support, and receive the protection they need before everything reaches a point of no return.